Ho, ho, ho. Welcome, everyone, to the From the Shadows podcast. I am your host, Shane Grove, and with me, as always, is the super elf, Jason.
Greetings, everyone.
I was hoping you'd give a little elfin hello. I mean, no.
Nope, not happening.
Jeez. Well, geez, we hope everybody, I think this will be coming out Christmas Eve, has a good Christmas Eve, a good Christmas despite our resident Grinch, Jason.
He's a mean one, Mr. Grinch.
Mr. Grinch, yes. But before we get started here, I got a text message from one of our favorite all-time guests, Mr. Stacy Brown, down in Florida, Jason.
Oh, what do you got to say? What's he talking about?
He just gave us a shout. He just wanted to tell me he was binging on some of our episodes. He's doing a little Uber driving. Okay, you imagine calling an Uber and Stacy Brown comes to pick you up, man.
Yeah,
that would be
you know what? I think I'm gonna go down there and hang out with him for a little bit, and I'm gonna call him as my Uber driver too. I'm gonna do that.
That would be fantastic. Like there's got to be a surcharge for getting him. I mean, that would be the best Uber drive ever. So I want to if hopefully Stacy's driving somebody while he plays this episode, and his passenger understands just how special this ride is that he's had. And Jason, I think we got something special planned with Stacy in the new year that I think our longtime listeners will be very anxious to hear that episode that Stacy and I talked about a little bit. So I'm not even going to tell you. So there. How about that?
Well,
I'm going to tell you.
I will make it happen. Put it that way.
So before we introduce our guest, I just want to remind everybody, besides having a Merry Christmas,
stay safe.
And we will stay safe. We will have a New Year's Eve show too. There'll be a New Year's Eve show, so you can really spend the holidays in the shadows, so to speak. But if you've had an experience, please get a hold of us on our social media, the From the Shadows podcast Facebook page, the After the Shadows Facebook page forum. Find me, Shane Grove Author, on Instagram. Find our From the Shadows podcast Instagram page, or just go to our website and click the contact button and send us an email. And since the last episode, I've probably gotten 5 different messages from people that have crazy good stories to tell. And Bob, who's going to join us here, is some of that group, I believe. He kind of reached out to us, and maybe I put him on the spot. I don't know. We'll get the real story here once we introduce him. So without further ado, let's welcome Bob from Akron, Ohio.
Welcome on the show, Bob.
Thank you guys for having me. It's my pleasure.
No, it's our pleasure. Definitely anybody that wants to come on and share their experiences with us. I mean, we're thrilled, and our fans are always thrilled to hear these kind of experiences. So Bob, let's get into it. Tell everyone why we got you on the show.
Well, I happened to reach out and let everybody know that I basically grew up with the Ohio Grassman. I listened to the show about the gentleman from Georgia, and a lot of the experiences he was having down there between him and his neighbor were basically the same experiences I heard about growing up, or actually happened to me while I was growing up. So, I mean, it dates as far back as, I believe my father said it was 1960 that their first encounter with the Ohio Grassman happened. And it spanned all the way to the mid-'90s, and we had a couple Bigfoot researchers come up and do some tests, and that's where they found And at that time, I believe it was the only one that was documented, the Bigfoot nest that now everybody finds, or now they know what they are. Let's put it that way. But I guess the first story that was ever told to me was back in the story was from 1960. I wasn't around in 1960. My uncle, my two uncles were down at the Ohio Erie Canal, which was where we lived, where my dad and his family lived. There was a giant chunk of woods, and then the Ohio Erie Canal ran through there. And they were down there fishing, and there was we called it the footbridge. What it was a drain pipe that crossed over the canal with a metal grate on it. And one of my uncles had his back to the woods and was fishing, and my other uncle was standing on the bridge facing him. And this thing stood up beside the bridge and reached over the bridge and actually put his hand on my uncle's shoulder. And that was the family introduction to the Grassman.
Okay.
That's incredible.
Now, their ages were 14 and 16 at that time. So they were still kids as well.
What was geez. So this Bigfoot reached up from below the bridge and stood up. It was on the bank. Like I said, The drain pipe runs over the water. So it keeps going, after the bank. I guess it stood up beside the drain pipe and was still taller than my uncle on the bridge, and just kind of placed his hand over and touched his shoulder. And then what?
So they basically, here's the thing. From what I heard on that, the end of that story was they basically dropped their gear and ran home without feet touching the ground. I mean, I can only imagine if that would have been me, I probably just would have fainted right then and there. It would have been over. He would have had me for lunch. that would have been it. But, these are the stories that I grew up with them telling me. Now, here's the thing. When these stories were being told, I'm thinking, okay, this is just our parents' way of keeping us out of the woods. Quick, don't go down there and cause mischief. Well, the uncle that was literally touched never denied the story. My grandfather never denied the story that they were scared to death when they came home. But the uncle that was facing this thing when it did this denied it up until 2 Thanksgivings ago.
Really? So you've questioned. Now, are they both still living?
One of them is.
Okay.
The one that was touched is deceased, but.
Okay. So what was the uncle that saw its reason for not admitting it to it until 50 years later?
I have my opinion. My dad and my uncle that was touched were really, really close. We, now was close to his sons, and we spent a lot of time at my grandfather's. The uncle that saw it, I don't ever remember in my lifetime him going back in those woods where all of us did. So, it to his kids, he denied it to me. Whenever the subject would come up, he'd just excuse himself from the conversation. And it was Thanksgiving, I think 3 years ago, might have been 3 years ago, that he finally admitted to it. At the table, after dinner, playing a game, he admitted to it. And his family's reaction was priceless. I mean, they turned white as a ghost, like this is their first time ever hearing the story, even though that we've all told them, he just never admitted it. They turned white as a ghost. And inside, it sent chills up my spine. Even though I've heard the story over and over and over and over, him finally admitting it sent chills. It was...
Now, let me ask you this. You say he never admitted it, but did he just flat out deny it? Or did he just not ever.
He would never answer.
Okay.
He wouldn't deny it, but he would just never answer. He would never discuss it. He wouldn't talk about it. You know, it's like he had. If you flat out asked him, "Hey, Uncle Trace, did you see the grass man?" You would not get an answer. He would act like he didn't hear you, or he'd just stare at you. He would never answer the question.
Wow. So your uncle that was well, here's the thing: is your uncle that was probably the one that didn't get touched? He probably got a lot better view of what happened than your uncle that got touched. I'm guessing because
because basically, from what I've heard, my uncle that was touched turned his head and seen this hand, had fingers and all, hand on it, coming down toward his shoulder. And just as it was about to touch, he took off and the fingers across the shoulder, like he ran through the hand. I don't know if it was going to just basically put his hand on the shoulder. Hey, how you doing? Or if it had malicious intent. But as you'll hear later on, I don't think there's anything malicious about this.
Well, let's be honest. If it had malicious intent, it would have got a hold of him.
Exactly.
I got you.
Yep,
You have to almost think that. I hate to think that, but I just got to think that your uncle that saw it happen has probably been shell shocked this whole time, because it'd be like seeing a baby wandering out into traffic and just getting hit by a car. Even though nothing bad happened, you're replaying that in your mind, like, oh my God, that could have went bad so quick.
And that might have explained, later on, as his kids were getting older, why he didn't have them over there as much as like my dad did or my uncle did, because all this was around my grandfather's house. And I would spend summers over there at my grandfather's. My uncle that was touched lived on and off at my grandfather's. So he was almost like a second dad to me. Him and my dad were that close. They were like brothers, but best friends at the same time. And the things that happened on that house, the story about the guy in Georgia with the ball of light, where my grandfather lived, he was the last house on the street. And then the street went to the left. And in between him and that bend in the left, there was just a pump house. And then the road, and then woods, and then the Erie Canal, and then houses on the other side of the canal. But as you go down the road, the only thing that was down there was like one house and a junkyard. That was the only thing down there. And it just, the stories that we heard, people going down there, teenagers basically to park or consume beverages that they weren't allowed to have at that time in their life, would be down there, and my dad and uncles would make a joke. I'd give it a half hour, and they would hightail it, fishtailing around the bend and everything. And the road was never kept up. It was a bumpy dirt road. So if you were doing 30 mile an hour, you're tearing up your car. And these guys would just fly around that corner and straight up to Main Street and be gone. So, there was an ongoing family joke. Well, Grassman introduced himself again. Now, we don't know if that's what happened down there, but...
That's what I was going to ask. So you think it was a Grassman or ball of light or something?
Well, we had a ball of light. My grandfather told me a story that he had a real narrow but long backyard. And like I said, he was the last house on the street, and he had told us that he's seen on several occasions a ball of light. I don't want to say fly, but more like hover down his driveway, all the way through the middle of the backyard, and just hover out by the end, toward the end of his backyard. And then it wouldn't like flash out. It would dissipate and just be gone. And it happened several times.
And what Okay, so if they, what was their opinion on that, or did they have an opinion? Because
the house is haunted. My grandfather, my dad, my uncles, even the one that denied the Bigfoot said the house was haunted. They had to remove every door inside the house except the bathroom door, because the doors would latch, and you'd be sitting there in the living room watching TV or whatever. You would see the doorknob turn, and the door would open. Then you'd see the door shut, and you'd see how the older doors, when they latched, the doorknob would wiggle.
Mm-hmm.
You'd see all that happen. The only room that had a door in the house was a bathroom, and it had one of those old bolt locks on it. And you better bolt lock it when you're in there, because it will open up. Yeah.
No privacy, right? Yeah. So here you got your dad and your uncles growing up in a haunted house surrounded by woods that they had experience with Bigfoot.
Yep.
Now, before we get into some more of the stuff, I mean, so obviously most of them are believers in the paranormal and cryptids if they're experiencing that themselves. But did they think there was any like the balls of light and the Bigfoot activity? Did they think they were connected, or they just coexisted?
They didn't think they were connected until I heard your show about the gentleman in Georgia.
Really?
And when I explained that, it's okay. I believe in somewhat of a coincidence, but okay, what the gentleman experienced in Georgia, we experienced up here. The lights, the Bigfoot, just the eerie feeling, and so this is just my opinion, okay? I'm not trying to reach out or force this down anyone's throat, but I almost think the balls of light is, that's going to sound even weirder than when I thought about it, a way of showing the Bigfoot, okay, it's okay to show yourself to this one.
Oh, okay. So maybe it's a scout. Like you're like thinking it's a interdimensional maybe scout for the Bigfoot, saying, okay, these guys are okay, like showing the way.
Just, I don't know. I don't have any other explanation. If it's a coincidence, it's a pretty darn big one.
Well, I mean, I listen. I mean, obviously, if you listen to us, probably you listen to Wes on Sasquatch Chronicles, and he has really become, in the last couple of years, super open to the whole prospect of the balls of light being connected to Bigfoot activity. And and it's just more of hearing so many people's stories where the two things are, they're happening at the same time or real close to the same time. And in fact, they had a gentleman on who was a representative of I believe it was a BFRO, who was like the I forget what region he was, but he came on the show to say, like, the BFRO, at least where he was, would not let him put anything in reports that talked about lights because they didn't want that narrative. They didn't want to muddy the waters, I guess, in their mind. That.
But here's my issue: if it's happening, it's happening.
I agree 100%. Like, and nobody's saying, "Hey, I saw a ball of light, and then I saw Bigfoot, and I know that's they were together." Okay, but you have to, if you have unusual or paranormal experiences, I mean, it's quite a coincidence, like you said, for them to both be happening at the same time. So I mean, who knows? I mean, nobody knows that if they're combined. Maybe somebody does know that they're combined. I don't know, but we're all just guessing right now.
Well, I think there's a strong correlation to it, because we've heard that from other guests and from other people's experiences that we've looked into. So there definitely is a correlation there, whether we want to acknowledge it or not.
Well, unfortunately, probably until somebody sees a Bigfoot crawl out of a ball of light, then people are going to argue that they have nothing to do with each other. So,
and there's going to be a camp that's going to argue that there is a very strong correlation that when you're going to see one, you're going to see another one not too far away.
I mean, I would even go as far as this, guys. You can stretch it this far. We're in agreement that Bigfoot have some intelligence behind them, right?
Absolutely, yes.
If certain people that don't believe in the paranormal never experience anything paranormal, they're like closed off to it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Bigfoot can almost be the same way. I mean, they're a master of camouflage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they could teach the U.S. Army how to camouflage, I might re-enlist. But if you look at it that, okay, if you're open and experience paranormal things, maybe that same mindset lets you experience Bigfoot encounters.
True.
Maybe they're not tied together, but you almost have to be open to it.
Yeah. And look, we talk to people all the time that are psychic, that can, feel stuff, empaths. So who's to say that if we believe that these creatures are more than just monkeys running around, because even monkeys running around, they can teach some of them sign language and skills to solve puzzles. Okay. So they're not like a slug out on a log. Okay. Who's to say their minds are that much different than ours? And the part of our brain that allows some people to be psychic, empaths, all the different ways that people can, predict the future, see the
the intuitive,
communicate.
Yes.
Yeah. That this creature doesn't have the same aspects, and maybe they have a slightly different aspect where, you're right. They can test the waters and see if, how we're going to react to a ball of light. And maybe if we don't go nuts over a ball of light, well, maybe, it's okay. Maybe I can show myself. These guys are open to the experience. I don't know.
Like I said, we had several experiences in the house. I got to tell this story. When we were living there, we lived in the room, and the basement was right by the kitchen door. You come down the steps, there's a window at the bottom of the steps, which is about 2 foot off the ground on the driveway side of the house. And you come down the steps, there's like 8 steps, and then you make a right turn, there's 3 more steps around the basement floor. Well, my grandparents had I guess it was a fruit cellar or something in the basement. And the old heating ducts, the round pipes before they got compact and square. And well, this was a round pipe that went right through the door of the fruit cellar. So they had to cut the corner off the fruit cellar door, for the door to open and close when they put the door in. Well, the door would scrape on that heating duct. You literally had to pull it open from the outside, or if you were inside the fruit cellar, you had to put some force on it to push it open. Well, right where that door opened on the other side of the fruit cellar there, right off mine and my brother's bedroom, was what you'd call a mud room, because there was a door right there that went up almost like a ladder, but it was steps to the backyard. It was like another back door, that you go straight down to the basement. Well, me and my brother used to sleep in that room that was right off of that. And my brother was sleeping by the wall. I was sleeping on the outside of the bed. We're laying there one night, and Mom and Dad are still upstairs with Grandpa and all them. And that fruit cellar door started to open. So I think we were like, I think I might have been like 9, and my brother would have been like 6, 7, something around that age. Well, you start to feel or hear that door go across that heating vent. We went under the covers. You know, if we can't see it, it can't see us. My little brother, who to this day denies it, but he put his hands and feet on the wall, laying in bed. He's like, go get Mom, Dad. I'm like, I'm not getting out of bed. He starts pushing his hands and feet on the wall, pushing me out of the bed. I remember just as I'm ready to fall out the bed, my feet hit the floor, boom, upstairs. My brother beat me up the steps. From behind me, he got, you know, so Dad comes down, the fruit cellar door is wide open. You know, there's nothing going on, just the door opened. And for about 3 months after that experience, we would feel something in our room, to the point where we'd be laying on the bed and you'd feel something sit on the bed. Like, you know, like if you were under the covers hiding and your dad sat on the bed, you'd feel it, you know, the bed compress. It did that every night for about 3 months. It got to the point where me and my brother could not go to sleep until it happened.
Oh, wow.
But again, other than the door, nothing physically moved in the room. It was just a sense that something was in there. And again, at 9 years old, I didn't feel threatened. You know, I mean, I almost felt like maybe it's a guardian angel, but there was something that would, you know, in that house that would just, it like, it was checking on me and my brother before we can go to sleep.
Wow, that's interesting for sure. I mean, so it didn't, you just didn't feel threatened at all. You just felt calm. Okay.
The only thing that scared us was when that door opened. You know, that was the first time it happened. You know, it's like, oh my God, what, you know, and there's just things like that happen inside the house. Outside the house is a different story. You didn't get that sense of it's okay. You know, like my grandfather, we had, I don't know what you'd call it. I guess it'd be like a carport, but it ain't a carport. It was 4 posts and a roof out in the very back of his yard. And he had shelves in it, no walls, you know, just 4 posts and a roof. And, you know, he was standing out there one day and we're all out there. And my grandfather had, for as long as I can remember, a receding hairline. So you use that old man stuff to gel your hair back.
Pomade.
And, yeah, whatever, you know. And he's standing there talking to us. And he goes, do you feel that? He described it like a sickle running right over the top of his head. We seen the hair move, but, you know, didn't like cut his hair or anything like that. Didn't see nothing other than his hair move. Now, if that was the wind, I think we all would have felt it. But it only happened right by that building on one corner.
A sickle went over the top of his head?
That's how he described it. It felt like a sickle.
That's like something the Grim Reaper carries around, right?
Exactly, yeah. Which my grandfather had a couple of them. He was a gardener. He had a bunch of that stuff, you know. But, you know, it was just a different feeling outside versus inside.
Well, I guess if you think of sickles, I mean, unless that's what he used to shave his head, I mean, I can't even imagine making a comparison to something that happened to be like a sickle. That's about
the only reason I think he can do that is because not the one like the Grim Reaper on the pole, but he had those little handheld sickles inside, like hanging up inside that. Maybe he was looking right at that when he said it, but it still was a very whoa, wait a minute, sickle?
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like, golly, Grandpa. Wow. So did did your uncles, did they experience anything else other than that one sighting and then like the balls of light and stuff?
Oh yeah. Well, my one uncle did. Like I said, the other uncle, as long as I can remember growing up, never went back in the woods over there. But the uncle that was touched, and like I said earlier, me and him were really close. I was really close with his son. And then there was my dad. The four of us would, go down to the canal there fishing. They taught us how to make lean-tos, and we'd stay out there and catfish all night. Well, I guess about 2 years after this happened with my uncle when he was touched, my dad and the uncle that was touched was down there. I don't know if they were fishing or going down there to fish, because from the main road, you can access the canal right there. If you walk about a half mile back, the canal comes into a Y. And if you're on the side of the canal that my grandfather's on, you go to the left, and that takes you to that walk bridge, that footbridge where he was touched. They were walking back in there. I think they were going fishing. And this thing flat out just stepped out in front of them. 25, 30 feet in front of them, blocking the path along the canal, and the canal's on their right, the woods would be on their left. And they seen it. My uncle knew right then and there what it was. This is my father's first time seeing it. Dropped their fishing gear and took off. So they turn around, and they're running back down the path. So if they go straight, they hit the main road. But there's a shortcut to my grandfather's on one of these little roads to go through the woods. If you go to the right, it takes you a winding route, which brings you right out to the edge of the street where my grandfather's house was. So they cut down that way, and up ahead of them again, this thing steps out 25, 30 feet in front of them. They turn around, run back the other way like they're going to go back up to the path and go to the main road. It steps out again. Now, like you said, Shane, if it was going to get him, it would have got him.
And they're sure it's the same one stepping out, or not, or just not another one.
I don't know. I mean, Dad said he didn't hear the thing running along the woods. In the woods along the side of them. It could have been another one. I don't know. But at this point, it's toying with them. Like a capture the flag, hide and seek tag, whatever you want to call it. So this went on for about a half hour. So they finally get down where they take that road to the shortcut to my grandfather's. And there's a fork in the road there. So they're squatting down in the woods, heavy breathing, trying to catch their breath, Straight ahead of them is the road that takes you straight to the end of my grandfather's street. Once you hit that street, 50 yards, you're in Grandpa's front yard. There's a steel cable that stretches at the end of my grandfather's street across the road, the little dirt road they're on, keeping cars from going down there. And they finally they seen the thing off to the side of the road, not quite in the woods, but not quite on the road. And they both just kind of rose up and took off. Neither one of them remember passing it, and neither one of them remember hitting that steel cable. But they go running into my grandfather's house, collapsing on the floor, breathing heavy, And that was my dad's introduction to the Grassman.
Wow. And what did those guys think they were seeing? Just an animal or what?
Well, they called it the Grassman, okay? And as far as we knew, there wasn't an Ohio Grassman. We found out years later that they've been called the Grassman since the 1800s. We didn't know there was no internet back then. So, I don't know if they thought it was an actual Bigfoot or if it was, some other sort of creature, monster, whatever you want to call it.
I mean, we're all pretty much of the mind that the Grassman and Bigfoot's the same thing. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. they just in their mind didn't realize that they were.
Yeah, this is all before In Search of with Leonard Nimoy and the Patterson Gimlin film. Well, the Gimlin film was filmed before it, but I mean, it wasn't. They didn't. I think back then you had two TV channels. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. We had 3. Oh, come on.
Okay, 3.
We had 3.
Well, I know I had 3 when I was growing up, but this is in the 50s, 60s.
Oh, jeez, yeah. Yeah.
So I know they had a lot of radio shows back then. I remember growing up and Grandpa still listening to radio shows, and I'm like, "There's a TV right here. We don't have to listen." But the difference of times, I guess.
Yeah, now people are just listening to us. So there you go.
I know that's what I do. I mean, I just got a list of podcasts I run through each night.
Yep.
So, and it's funny because I know a story that you're going to talk about, and how much of this is centered around the Erie Canal. And we have talked about how you could travel basically from Cleveland to Cincinnati down to the Ohio River along waterways and never be seen. And you got to think that the Erie Canal, because the Erie Canal was not used that long. It probably took longer to build it than it was actually used.
Yeah.
And I mean, they probably found that a great way to travel, the Erie Canal, for sure.
Well, they always follow waterways. Remember that thing from Boggy Creek? They always follow the waterways. And it makes perfect sense because every animal has to have water, and predators are going to congregate at the water.
Yep.
And I don't believe this thing eats. I mean, I'm sure it does, but it doesn't live off of eating grubs. I'm sorry. It has to eat more than insects and small game. I mean, I'm a firm believer in it. It'll kill a deer. But I still don't consider that malicious. It's survival.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. There's no doubt about that. I mean, if we're going to go out and hunt as a human, how can we look at an animal, something that's more animal, as being malicious just because they can kill a deer a little bit differently than what we do?
Yeah.
You can't tell me if you were out hunting, if you couldn't grab a deer and rip its neck off, you wouldn't rather do that than shoot it, right?
It would be more efficient. Yeah.
I just thought you'd say it'd be a lot more fun, but whatever.
No.
So what other types of experiences then did your uncles and your grandpa have?
As far as I know, I mean, they told me they heard sounds and things like that, but that was as far as the experiences with them go. If there's more, I don't know them. But it carried over to me and my cousin and brother. I mean, we started having them, and me and my cousin more so than my brother. I don't know what it was about him, but he had basically 2 encounters, and he wouldn't go back in the woods after that. The first one, again, we were staying with my grandfather. My uncle was living there at the time, and my dad had worked at a gas station for a second job up the street. Well, we had taken food to my dad, my mom, me, and my brother, and we were coming back home. And we pull in the driveway, go inside, and one of the things me and my brother used to do is one of us would take the coats down the basement. It didn't have to be all of us taking our coat down. One person would take all the coats down. Mm-hmm. And it was supposed to be my brother's turn to take the coats down. And he's like, Bob, will you take the coats down? I don't want to go down. I'm like, no, it's your turn. I'm just being the jerk big brother, So he opens the basement door and starts down, and he couldn't have hit 3 steps. And he let out a blood-curdling scream. I mean, I can't think of a guy having a voice that go this high. Now, granted, like I said, he was only probably at this time 7, I mean, And he dropped the coats and ran upstairs. My uncle and grandfather are sitting in the living room, 10 paces from the basement door. Me and my mother are in the kitchen, which is just on the other side of the basement door. He screams, runs up the steps. My mom runs from one direction. My grandpa and uncle run from the other. And he's like, I seen 2 legs standing outside the window. Because remember, I said there's a window right at the bottom of the steps. So my grandfather went to the front door. My uncle went to the back door. Nothing, nobody there. So my brother is swearing this happened. He's not making it up. He's not lying. They were standing there. So things calm down. Mom takes us downstairs an hour later or so to go to bed. Dad's due home in a little bit. Well, he was on a motorcycle at the time. And he come down the street, turned into the driveway, and you could hear it was a little Honda 200, not a big bike. And you could hear it come in the driveway, and then you hear it rev up and take off. Well, he takes off through the backyard. Then you hear him fly back up the driveway, and you hear it go down the street. Then you hear it come back, park, and he comes in the house real quick. Well, at this time, we're hearing this. Mom hears the bike take off. We all go upstairs. By the time we get upstairs, he's already in the process of telling my uncle that the dang thing was standing right back about 50 feet past the end of the driveway. So he went to chase it through the backyard. Well, he didn't know exactly what it was when he turned the corner. He just seen a shadow in the backyard. And my grandfather had about a 4.5-foot fence at the end of his yard. There was a garden in that fence. This thing just kind of in mid-stride went over the fence. So that's when he turned around and went back, because right behind my grandfather's property, there was an old farmer's lane that went in between his property and a farmer's field, which was right on the other side of the lane. Well, Dad got down there when he went around on the road and realized, I can't see anything off the road. I'm coming back, And, that was just my brother's first experience with it. He swore it was the grassman's legs. At that time, we never seen the grassman. We didn't know if it was. But Dad chasing something an hour later out of the yard kind of made us all think that, yeah, the grassman's got close to home now.
Oh, boy. You guys can't get away from this thing.
I don't know if I want to. I say that now, but if I'm standing and see the thing, I'm running like a little coward. But I mean, here's the thing with it. It's scarier and all get out going through it. But when it's over, it's exciting. And you kind of almost want to do it again until it happens again. And then you don't want to do it.
Like Christmas at the post office that's exactly you're describing. Yeah. Okay.
you look forward to it when it's happening. You're scared. You're trying to figure out how to get out of it. When it's over, how do I get that adrenaline back? That I guess it'd be the same thing as people going to haunted houses on Halloween. You want to feel scared. You want to, and to me, it'd be almost the same thing because like I said, if the thing wanted to get any of us, it would have on several occasions. But my dad and uncle used to take us back in the woods. We're going to go find the grass man. And we'd go back there for hours and not see a sign of it. But if we go back there and fish or goof off, it would let us know it's there.
Really? So you feel like it knew when you were coming looking for it, and it just, like, it sounds to me like this thing has like you said, like it's just messing around with you guys.
Yeah.
The whole time.
It's got a very sick sense of humor. But I mean, my uncle and cousin, his son would be back here fishing and get rocks thrown at him. Nothing big. You know what I mean? Little, like pea pebbles, thrown at him, getting hit, but that would be it. It would never, they're sitting right on the edge of the canal. It could have came out and grabbed any of them. There's like a 4-foot path. That's it between the canal and the woods. It would have been nothing for it to come out of the woods, grab them and take them back. And that'd be it. But it never did anything like that.
Wow. That's, so at what point have you guys, did your uncles and dad, I mean, did they ever just become okay with it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it got to the point during that time we were all okay with it. You know, we'd sit out in the backyard and pitch dark just to see if we could hear something, and not to try to track it down, not to try to, you know, do anything to it, but we wanted to, you know, hear it, get a sign of it. You know, I mean, there's other stories my dad had told us that I'm not real good on the details, so I don't know them all. But, you know, my dad could fill 5 of your shows and probably still not tell everything that happened. But there was one time, there was me, my dad, my uncle, my cousin, my brother, and then my other uncle who would visit quite often, but I don't know that ever had an experience. We were all going to go down the canal. And here's the thing. My dad and uncle had planned on scaring me and my cousin. They had this all planned out. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So
I gotcha.
We go down there. Now, we took the road that's right, like you walk out my grandfather's front door, turn left, and don't take the bend and just go straight. You're on this, I don't know if you'd call it a utility road or not, because back in these woods, there was all these pump houses. I don't know if it controlled the level of the Erie Canal or what, but there's like 4 or 5 of them down there. You know, just like little shacks that had wells, you know, that they opened and closed at various times and so forth. So there's 5 or 6 of us down there. And for some reason, it happened that my cousin and my dad got paired off. And me and my brother and my uncle got all grouped up. So that right there should have sent me some sort of signal. You know what I mean? That they're planning some, you know, shenanigans right now. So we're down there and we go separate directions, and my dad screamed, "Oh my God, there it is." So we come running back, and during all this, my other uncle has wandered off. The one that's not normally part of the group has wandered off. So automatically, you know, me and my cousin are thinking, there's the monster. He's the one who's not here. Dad screamed, he's seen it. You know, this whole thing's about, we're waiting for my uncle to jump out, you know. And we, you know, we're sitting there and, you know, my cousin's like, I didn't see it, but your dad said it was like that tall, pointing at this branch is like 20 feet in the air, which is a gross exaggeration. And they're sitting there and they're trying to play along, but you can almost see a sense of urgency on my uncle's face, because he's like, you know, where's Henry? Well, we can't find Henry, you know, the other uncle. And now their whole demeanor went from playing around and trying to experiment to real concern, like how did Henry walk off? You know, because he just up and vanished and nobody knew where he was. We don't have flashlights. You know, we're going strictly off moonlight and knowing the path. And, you know, it started to escalate really quick that something might be wrong. So my dad and uncle tell us, if anything happens, follow the road to Grandpa's house. And we're sitting there, and my grandfather's neighbor had a dog that would constantly follow anybody down that went to the canal. The dog loved to go play in the swamps, loved to go, you know, chase whatever it chases down there. So we're all kind of squatting down off the path, and we hear this dog yelp. And if I'm lying, I'm dying right now. This arm, the dog starts coming out of these weeds, and this arm, I could see like from the forearm to the hand, comes out of the woods and swats the ass end of this dog, lifting it up and spinning it around in midair. This dog landed on all fours and beeline back toward my grandfather's house, or his house, you know, right next door to my grandfather's. And my dad and uncle look at me, look at my brother, look at my cousin, and say, we're going to find Henry. Stay right here. If anything happens, beeline right to Grandpa's. So we can hear them chomping off in the woods, in the weeds. And I'm like, me and my cousin are like, we're not going to sit right here. There's woods behind us. There's woods in front of us. Let's get to a path. So we go to the fork in the road. And along this road is white rock, not pebbles, not giant rock, but maybe the size of a golf ball or better. So my cousin comes up with this idea that we'll do like what we've seen on National Geographic, that animals will put themselves in a circle. So I stood facing the road that went to my grandfather's. My cousin faced the road that went further into the canal, and my brother faced the road that had the shorter path to the main road. We're standing there. My brother's staring off. We're in his direction. We're all looking our directions, and we hear something behind me coming toward my brother's direction in the woods. We turn that way. This thing gradually just walks across the road, slightly hunched over, a slightly conjugal head, and arms that go past their knees. Like their fingertips would be below their knees. My brother drops his rocks, literally, mentally and physically. Me and my cousin start firing these rocks at this thing. Now, they're really bright white rocks. We can see the rocks hit this thing. Now, granted, we were 12 years old. We're not like Major League Baseball players. We were throwing as hard as we could, but let's be realistic. How hard is that really? You could see the rocks hit this thing. You can hear the thud of the rocks hitting. It just never breaks stride, never makes an aggressive mood. It turns toward us slightly, but goes down into the woods. So it's heading toward my grandfather's now, that direction. We stand there for a minute. We don't hear a growl or a roar, but more like a grunt, but a real deep, menacing, like you could feel it, grunt. So we took off. The shortest route out of the woods was to the main road. So we're screaming all the way there. We get to the main road. We go out. There's a parking lot there. Firestone Tire and Rubber Plant was right across the street, out of the main road. We crossed the main road. We don't even stay on the side of the street that the woods are on. We crossed the main road, and we're screaming for my dad and my uncle. We can hear my dad and uncle hollering for us. But, we just keep screaming. Hopefully they'll come the right way. We're telling them, we're on this road, we're on this road, we're on this road. Dad comes out of the woods. We come up to him, and he's like, "Where's your uncle?" And I'm like, "You guys are looking for me?" He goes, "Oh, no, your Uncle Dick, where's he at?" And I'm like, "He never came out." So at this point, Dad hollers for my uncle, who answers. So Dad tells us, take the main road, walk around, go back to Grandpa's. He goes back in, into the woods to where my uncle's at. Takes us about a half hour to walk down the main road and up the block and everything to get to my grandfather's house. We're trying to tell my grandpa what happened, and my dad and uncle come walking in. Well, my dad's shirt's ripped. We don't exactly know if he caught it on a piece of, like a branch, but his shirt's ripped and his chest is red. And it took a while for him to tell me, but he said they were squatting down and this thing moved him. Just physically pushed him out of the way and took off. He said it didn't grab him, it didn't throw him, it didn't, you know what I mean? It just shoved him. But it ripped his shirt and it took off, across the road and into the woods. Well, at this time, we still can't find my other uncle. So my dad and uncle grab guns and go back down. Now me and my cousin and brother are really freaking out. Our dads are down there with whatever this is. They have loaded guns now, An hour later, they come back. They had no more sign of my uncle, no more sign of the whatever, the grass man, anything. Found out my uncle we started through the woods, turned around, walked out, went home. Never told any of us. We found him at home the next day. So, we were a little upset with my uncle at that point. I didn't go down there and play no games, But that was my biggest interaction with it, where I actually physically saw it. And that's where I go back to, if it would have got us, it would have. I mean, we pounded it with rocks, and it grunted at us. So
I just can't.
Not like it did anything.
I can't get over it putting its hands on
my dad.
On your dad and your uncle. Like, it's just like.
Well, my uncle didn't get touched. He was touched the first time, back at the football
that's what
earlier.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I almost think, remember I told you we found those nests. We used to find those all the time. We never put the 2 and 2 together. I almost think that Dad was in between it and where it wanted to be. And it just kind of walked by and shoved him. But it shoved him enough to rip his shirt and put a red mark on his chest. Not a scratch, but a red mark.
So,
and
so
Dad
how
didn't tell us that right away. So,
well, how did that affect him? How did that affect him?
That night or later? I mean, obviously that night. My dad had this thing. Growing up, I never seen my dad afraid. I never seen my dad back down from anything. The bigger the challenge, the bigger he stepped up. That just might be my perception of my dad. To me, he's my hero. You know what I mean? But I'd never seen him back down. And my uncle did 3 tours in Vietnam. He was the biggest, excuse the term, badass that I know. He was a Marine that did 3 tours in Vietnam. He had that Marine mentality. I'm going to go all ahead full. No matter what, that mindset. And for them to come back and grab guns, I think that's what messed with my psyche the most. Because before it was stories and, rocks and sticks being thrown and a few cold spots we'd feel when we'd walk back there where your hair would stand up. I mean, not to mention the odor, but there was nothing physically threatening about it until that night. So I stayed out of the woods probably a year and a half. I wouldn't even go down there fishing. As far as me and my cousin, we'd go out to the farmer's field behind my grandpa's yard. That's as far as we'd go. We would not venture down to the junkyard. We would not venture out in the woods. If we wanted to go fishing, we'd go to Portage Lakes. We wouldn't go down the canal that was 5 minutes from us. So a lot of things changed for me that night. And of course, if we weren't going down there, Dad worked. He wasn't going down there because, it'd be Friday night. It'd be, hey, let's go fishing. Well, let's go to Portage Lakes, Dad. So he knew that it messed with me. You know what I mean? It wasn't till about 3 years later that we were walking down the road and there was an old sand quarry there that they filled in with concrete, and you'd see giant concrete slabs sticking up out of the ground. So me and my cousin walked up on that. Now there's a clearing here. Okay. It's not woods. This is right alongside the road. The woods are probably 75 yards further back. So we felt safe. So we're looking around here, and you could see like holes in between the concrete, like where the slabs don't match, they just like dumped them down and there was air spaces. And this one just looked ginormous and it looked all padded down. So I'm sticking my head down there. Now, mind you, it's daylight, but once you get where you're looking not up and down, but left or right inside this cavern thing, you can't see nothing. It's pitch black, but the ground's all weighted down and flattened out and like something's down there. So we climb out of there, we're standing there, and there's rocks being thrown at us. Again, not big ones. So we start to walk from there right to the road, because we know, okay, it's back, And as we're walking back to the road, we stumble on this footprint. It's a 3-toed footprint, probably 20, 21 inches long, maybe 4 or 5 inches wide, and about 4 inches deep. And now this is not mud, it's dirt, but we're walking and we're barely leaving shoe impressions in the dirt. And this is that defined of a track. And it was the only one because there was grass next to it, almost like it stepped there, then went up into the grass. So this is before we started even considering doing any type of research or anything. So we weren't doing a cast on the Bigfoot print or anything like that. So we went back, got my uncle, took him down there, told him we found this footprint. And he's like, yeah, okay, sure, He comes down, looks at it, and goes, I don't want you guys back in the woods anymore. I mean, flat out, I don't want you back in the woods anymore. This is the guy who just took us out, a year or two earlier to scare us, showed us how to, build these lean-tos, how to set up catfish lines after he was touched. Now he's telling us don't go back in the woods.
From the 3-toed footprint.
Yep.
Do you want me to tell you why?
I'll tell you. I know why. I know now. I didn't know then. But so he called my dad and said, "Look, the boys found a footprint. Why don't you come over to the house tonight?" Now, mind you, I told you I stayed with my grandfather basically all summer long. That was my summer. I love to be over there. I love the house. I love the feelings. I like being there. It was never dull, as you could tell. But so my dad comes over, and I'm like 16 at this time, 15, 16 years old. So my dad and uncle, they have a 6-pack of beer with them. And we take them back, show them the footprint. And my dad and uncle just kind of look at each other. I said, but that's not the weird thing. Come here. So now we got flashlights. And we go over and we look, this has been filled in for years. They know about it, okay? But they never went up and played around in it like we did. And we showed them that big hole in the concrete, where they didn't match up. And I said, look at how padded down the dirt is. So he shines his light down there. Now, this whole time we're getting rocks thrown at us, but not hitting us, okay? Just as my dad gets on all fours and looks down this hole, this rock that must have been 25, 30 pounds lands 2 foot from his head. It doesn't roll. It just lands with a thud and doesn't move. So to me, that tells me it came from straight up and down. You know what I mean? It didn't get thrown where it could have hit, tumbled, rolled. It came up and down. Now, the woods are 75 feet, 75 yards, something like that, away from at least 75 feet. I know that, away from where we're at. So something threw this rock that landed 2 foot from my father's head, and the rock didn't roll. It just landed with a thud. My dad and uncle left the 6-pack of beer sit there. This is where we found out about gifting, guys. Left the 6-pack of beer sit there, and we walk at a high rate of speed, not run, walk down the main road to my grandpa's house. The whole time, rocks are being thrown at us. Smaller ones, not hitting us, but landing and rolling in front of us. Like, I still see you, keep on going type thing. And that was the last time that my dad went down there. He said he's not going back down there. He's done. It made it very clear that it didn't want him there, and he took the warning seriously. And it wasn't until 1995 that he went back down there with those Bigfoot researchers, which Jody Cook was one of them.
Wow. So let's go back to the 3-toed footprint.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I don't believe that's a Bigfoot that made that, right?
I do.
You do?
Yes, and let me tell you why. Okay.
Okay. Because I immediately went to Dogman.
Okay. See, I didn't go to Dogman with that because it's a foot, not a paw. I've heard the Dogman. I've been a little bit. Look, I'm gonna be honest with you. Up until 3 weeks ago, I knew nothing about the Dogman. I heard the stories, but I automatically went to the Beast of Bray Road, which I thought was just a movie. I didn't know there was actual werewolf sightings. So that tells you that I'm not by any means an expert on any of this. But did you guys ever see The Legend of Boggy Creek?
Yeah.
The three-toed footprint.
So, okay. Well.
Now, it's almost like, I believe it's a Bigfoot species, but it's not 10 foot tall in Akron, Ohio.
So you think it's a smaller
version in southern Arkansas?
Okay.
I almost think they grow to their environment, but of everything I've ever read, the three-toed Bigfoot are the ones that I don't want to say are violent because I don't look at them as being violent, but they're more mischievous. And that's kind of what I look at the Grassman as. Now, down in southern Ohio, they're five-toed footprints. They're bigger. I don't look at that as a Grassman. That's a full-blown Bigfoot.
So you're okay.
My grandfather's was about 7 foot tall.
So you truly believe then that even though they're maybe the same creature theoretically, but there's the different versions are vastly different as far as what is in a type of area. Okay.
I mean, it could be the same with the human. The different races, and that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you guys saw the three-toed footprint. I didn't. I mean, that would be. I wouldn't know what to think if I saw a three-toed.
It's not the three-toed footprint. You say three-toed, people automatically go to like a web foot. It's nothing like a web foot. It's a normal footprint, but 3 toes versus 5. They're not spread out. The 3 toes are not spread out. They take the length of, the width of the foot, but it's 3 toes versus 5. And it's that's the only footprint I ever saw. If my dad or uncle seen them, I don't know. But whatever that footprint, it set something off with my uncle. He flat out said, "I don't want you guys going back in here alone anymore. That's it, no more."
Which is, and he never explained himself, why all of a sudden he.
And he passed away a couple years later, in a car wreck. So I never got to pick his brain. And according to my dad, he never seen a footprint other than that one. And the strangest thing about this whole thing, Shane, and this is the story I got into with you earlier. I don't know if it was the state of Ohio or the Parks Department or what came up with this brilliant idea to put in the Ohio Erie towpath, towpath.
Yep.
The main path that I said you could walk along the canal has been there since my dad and uncles were young. Okay. They blacktopped that. And where it comes down to a Y at the canal, the towpath goes across the canal. It's like on a floating bridge. And it does that along the Firestone property coming from Summit Lake. It's a floating bridge at that point. Excuse me. And then it picks back up land and goes through Barberton, all the way down. But when it has to cross the canal, they don't build like a concrete bridge going over the canal. It's like a floating bridge that goes over it. They could have done that and left the woods intact. It wouldn't have caused a problem. So they started putting this in, and they started like at the Summit Lake area, working down toward, Canton and all that, working south. And they got to the part where the woods are, and they started working, and they stopped for a whole year. They worked like 4 weeks and then pulled all their equipment out and stopped, and then came back next year to finish it up. Well, in the meantime, some genius with the planning department of the city of Akron decided we'll just open up all these wells and flood all that. So all that woods up to about 200 feet to the junkyard is underwater.
And you've never been able to find out why.
Officially, no. I had some friends, and I'm not going to mention their name, but they were high-ranking officials with the Akron Police Department. I mean, not elected officials, but they had high rank with the Akron Police Department. And these are guys that I've known for 20 plus years. And they told me that they kept getting calls from first the construction company that was doing it, that people were vandalizing their equipment, ripping hoses off their equipment, ripping the seats off their equipment, ripping the treads off the dozers, the tracks.
Oh, yeah, because that's easy to do.
Yeah, like vandals would have no problem. A couple guys just grab that and fold that over, no big deal. So they hired a security company to sit back with their equipment. That lasted 2 days. And the two guys sitting in their car quit. The security company could not get anyone to go back down there and sit to watch the equipment. They basically broke their contract.
Wow.
And then they flood all this. And then they go back after it's all flooded and finish the work.
So I wonder why they thought the flooding would keep out whatever it is that was doing that.
My dad thinks it still goes back in there. I don't know how. I mean, the night that we were all down there before we went to the, where the rock was thrown at my dad, we walked down the main road. It goes all the way past the junkyard down to that footbridge, and we're standing there, and there's like a marshland off to one side, the opposite side of where the canal's at, and we heard limbs breaking, and I don't mean twigs, I mean limbs. That part's not flooded, but just to me, that's not enough land to keep it there. You know what I mean? It might be a spot for it to go back and spend the night, but it's not going to live in that. I mean, it might be 75 square yards. It's not real big back in there. But my dad seems to think it still goes back there. I don't. But they wiped all this out. I mean, the pump house of my grandfather's was torn down. The junkyard was under new ownership. They got one hell of a deal to basically put concrete walls behind their property. I don't know if it's to stop the water from coming there or, some other reasons. But, I mean, but it goes back to my belief that I believe the federal government, local governments know these things are there.
Really? So now
Park services know they're there.
So do you think now how close is this to like the city limits of Akron?
Okay, I'll tell you what. I'm not sure how familiar you are with it. I know people can't go back here and mess around now, so I'll just give it up to you. The boundaries of the woods that I grew up and played in, had these encounters, is North Main Street or South Main Street, Wilbeth Road, Waterloo Road, and Manchester Road, State Route 93.
Oh, okay.
Firestone Stadium, where the softball Firestone or the Akron Racers played, is right down, literally catty corner from this. If you come down, like say you come up the highway, you get off at Main Street.
Yep.
When you get off the highway, turn left on Main Street, go down to Wilbeth Road, make a left. Once you go down the bottom of the hill, look to the left, and you can see the water. It's flooded up right up to that. Okay, I mean, there's a parking lot that they use for Firestone for the trucks to park in, and it's water all back there. Now, there's still that towpath in between the flooded water and the Erie Canal, but they flood it. It has an eerie prehistoric look to it now because there's dead trees growing, or still upright. You know what I mean? It almost looks like a newer version of the Everglades.
So it was close. It's close enough right there to what's going on every day in civilized downtown Akron that they needed to get rid of whatever was there.
That's what I think. Yeah, I mean there was police reports made as far back as the 70s about something being back there, and cops wouldn't go back there without shotguns and more than 4 or 5 cruisers. To me, I thought that was for protection from the grassman. I know now that cops ain't going to go in the woods without shotguns now anyway, if they're called out there. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
It has nothing to do with what I thought it was, but it just, I was furious about it. And then when Jody Cook, he even came up and went out with me and my dad in 95. And then he did the episode of the Ohio Grassman for Monster Quest. And in between that time, he says in Monster Quest that he had came back up to Akron to see if he could find any more nests. And it was so overgrown, he couldn't remember where he was going in there. So it was a thriving wooded land. It wasn't that the woods were dying. So within 2 years, from 95 to 97, he came back up here to try to find more nests or find evidence or, anything. And he couldn't remember where he was going in there because it was so overgrown.
Wow, that just I see what you mean though by that arousing the suspicion of you thinking this, at least the city government knows what's going on in their city,
Yeah. But it's just, you hear of like these national parks, okay, like Yellowstone. They got bear there. They got signs all over the place. Don't feed the bear, all that. They know people and bear interact, but they don't close the park. But now you have these park areas that are chaining up paths to go into the woods, for no apparent reason. And their excuse is there's a bear in the area. You're like at Yellowstone National Park. Of course there's bear. So I'm a firm believer in, at least the park service knowing they're there. And until the government basically comes out and says, okay, yeah, these are real, they're going to have to do whatever they can to keep it on their end as hush-hush as possible.
I can't argue with you. I find it hard to believe with so many untrained, uneducated in geology and science and stuff, how many people have seen and experienced and witnessed these things, that the people that really know what they're doing out there can't figure out where these things are at and find them.
I almost think the scientific community is not allowed. Like, maybe they know, maybe some scientists, I know there are some scientists that investigate it and research it. And come on, they had that show on where they blew up and slowed down and enhanced the Patterson-Gimlin film. And I don't know, I think everybody out there has seen like at least 1 or 2 cheesy Bigfoot movies.
Oh,
where it's obviously a costume. It's obviously just so, B-style movie that, okay. I mean, even Chewbacca looked more real, but in the 50s when the Gimlin film was filmed, I don't know if you've ever seen monster movies or old horror movies from that era. They didn't look nothing like that.
No, I
they
mean,
even showed that Patty has a butt crack now. Nobody faked a butt crack.
Yeah, they often said when the Patterson Gimlin film came out, and I think it was the 60s, that Planet of the Apes was the movie that was out with the state of the art costume design. And I can tell you there's nobody that is confusing one of the Planet of the Apes, Dr. Zaius, with Patty,
Yeah. So, I mean,
that's not even close.
But, here's the thing. In the way the world is today, if the government come out and says, okay, Bigfoot's real, how many people are going to even pay attention?
Probably.
I mean, the ones that are interested in it.
Yeah.
If you're not interested into it, oh, big deal. So what?
We've discussed it on numerous shows about the disclosure about UFOs and how little people really cared.
Yeah, well, they buried so much information in that. I was one of those people who tried to read it on the internet. But I mean, just them coming out and saying, yeah, we have off-world vehicles in our possession. Nobody even cared. Nobody even asked a question at that press conference. Yeah.
Like,
my brother that had this happen to him with me now holds a government job, and he's got a little bit of rank in it. And I've asked him flat out, what's the story with UFOs? They don't exist. They're not real. But I also know he had to sign that disclosure. You know what I mean? He's in that field. I can't come out and I don't want to cause any problems. I don't want to, but he's in that field. That's a civilian job. Okay. He's not, but it's a government paying job.
Well, I don't know if I ever disclosed this on any of our shows, but when I first got to know the Ozark Howler, and we were, he has an extensive background in the federal government, including being an air marshal and Homeland Security. And I asked him, I said, you got to know something, right? And he's like, well, what do you mean know something? And I go, like about UFOs or Bigfoot. And he goes, if you're asking me, if I ever opened up somebody's desk drawer and there was a file that said Bigfoot is real, he goes, no. He goes, I've never seen any of that stuff. But I go, I can't believe, I think we all have this romantic notion that maybe somebody knows something, but he often sets me straight. He goes, if you think the government knows anything, you're crazy. He goes, because it was what we think of as the government doesn't exist.
Exactly.
He goes, it does not exist. And he goes, and if you really think that they are able to or capable of conspiracies or cover-ups in any way, shape, or form, he goes, that's a real stretch. He goes, they can't even get the payroll right a lot of times.
Well, here's my thing on that. The government in a whole probably could not do that.
Yeah.
But one division of the government can cover up their mistake or cause something, and the other divisions don't know about it. That's how things are done. That's my opinion. I'm not.
And it's a very small scale. It's not as far-reaching and.
I used to host an online radio show handling this sort of thing, and Blog Talk, since certain things have happened, have deleted all my archives. But I called the coronavirus pandemic 9 years ago. I didn't call it coronavirus, but I said, this is what's going to happen. There's going to be this pandemic that's not as bad as what the government's portraying, but the American people are going to make it worse than what it is and cause it to escalate, and kind of nailed the, hit the nail right on the head with that. I'm not saying the pandemic wasn't real, but if people would have took the precautions they needed to take sooner, I don't think it would have blown up as bad as it did. Again, just my opinion, but
yeah, no, everybody's entitled to their opinion for sure, and anybody that argues that, well, I mean, what's their basis for arguing that?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's not really. I mean, but the problem is nobody believes anything anymore. There's been so much shade thrown on anything that it's hard to believe. I mean, it's hard to believe statistics and anything that gets thrown your way that is deemed official. So, and sometimes it's good to be skeptical, but other times it's just, I think you're pounding your head against the wall.
You're feeding into the mass panic of it. You know what I mean? It's like how much stuff went around the internet, like during the whole election thing, that spiraled out of control. The pandemic on the internet spiraled out of control. And it's just like, people, you read it on the internet does not make it true. I don't care what the commercial says.
I mean, if we could take a cat and make it a viral sensation because it, yawns or something in a funny way on TikTok, then anything's possible.
Yeah, I refuse to. I get in so much trouble on Facebook. I'd hate to see what I could pull off on TikTok. So I'm like, no, I'll just avoid that altogether.
So in your estimate, because I think you heard the Small Town Monsters and Seth Breedlove and those guys, the stuff they're doing, which is not far from where you're at.
No, that's when I heard that episode and I'm like, oh man, I got to talk to these people. You can't even film anything, do a documentary in the area where all my stuff happened because, like I said, you got to be a scuba diver now. But the Minerva, I mean, I love that whole subject. And what is coming up that I know you mentioned, I don't know if it's, up in I think she said it on the show, so I should be able to say it. She's got to do research on the Jersey Devil.
Yep.
I am so waiting to see that one.
Yes. In fact, I just told Jason this in an upcoming show. We will be talking to a gentleman who has had some experiences in the Pine Barrens. I just spoke to him yesterday, so I'm very excited about that because I just am intrigued with that whole area. So
I got to drive along the outskirts of it. I drive semi, and it's like I've been to the Pacific Northwest, gotten a little bit of trouble up there with some other drivers doing Bigfoot howls, and it's, to me, this is my dream job, even though I gripe about it and moan and complain about traffic and deadlines, but to go that's the only thing about New Jersey I like. I hate driving a truck in New Jersey, but if you get on the outskirts in those Pine Barrens, it's beautiful. It's like, wait, this is New Jersey? Hold on.
Well,
wait a minute.
Yeah.
You turn around, go the other way, and you're, in the most crowded area in the world. So.
Yeah, that's what's so intriguing about that is that, it is in the middle of a lot of metropolitan. It's surrounded by some very big cities, and to think that just like that, you're out in the middle of a medieval forest. So
exactly.
It's very interesting. So, but what really gets me is how many, and I think Jason will agree, how many people we've talked to that in this part of Ohio that you're at, there's just Sasquatch sighting after Sasquatch sighting, along with some Dogman sightings. And and I lived up in that area for a little bit. It just blows my mind because, it just does. There's no other way to say it, because I'm used to being in Canton and Akron and Cleveland and being on the highway, and to think that just a stone's throw, there's all this stuff happening out in the woods.
like over the summer, the rash of Bigfoot reported sightings in Ashland, Ohio.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, which is, it's like, wait.
Yeah. But if you drive from Mansfield to Ashland, I can't think, is it 42 maybe?
Yeah.
There's parts in there where it's swampy and densely forested, and you can see that if something wanted to hide out, hang out for a little bit, there's plenty of space.
I used to listen to Art Bell with my dad growing up, and the reason we got these Bigfoot guys contacted us to go down, to the canal, we were hearing a story about, I believe it was a Green Beret. It was some sort of special forces, either Green Beret or Army Ranger, or might even have been a Marine Recon. But he was retired, and he went in these woods that by a few paths are the same woods that my encounters happened, and stayed back there for 35 days, lived completely off the land, and was never seen a human being the whole time he was back here. And he's like, he was actually paid to do this. I don't know who paid him, but to see if something, the size of a human or more could adequately survive and stay hidden in these woods. And he said, a train runs through every 4 hours, just be away from the tracks, and you would never, you could disappear back in there. And to me, it's like, wait, those are the backyard woods, and he proved that there was enough wildlife, now granted, they're trained to live off the land a little bit better than, you or I would be, I'm sure he ate his fair share of grubs, but, rabbit, pheasant, all that's back there.
Wow.
There's deer back there, but I mean, it's just to be that close to civilization and nobody know it doesn't seem as far-fetched, being it was put in those terms.
Yeah, that's a good point. So when is before we let you go here, when's the last time that you've had an experience?
I walked the towpath. Me and at that time, my wife were having a problem. I went for a long walk, stayed a few nights back in there before they flooded it. It was still the pathway, and nothing definite happened, but the feeling was there, and you'd hear a noise, and but nothing showed itself, no rocks, no anything like that. But to me, that was an encounter because I grew up with that sort of thing. But the same feelings, the cold spots, you think you hear something and you look that way and it's not there, sort of thing. I don't know if it was my mind playing with me, but I'm calling it, to me, as it was an encounter without seeing it. And that was, 2004 or 2005.
So it's almost kind of sad that you can't go back to where you experienced all this stuff and kind of.
And even my dad today says, I'd like to go back down there. I would too. I'd like to relive it all. Like I said earlier, it was scarier than scary going through it. But when it was over, there was that sense of, I don't know if it was a survival mechanism, I survived it, or excitement that what you just experienced, not everyone in the world's going to have. Not 90% of the world's not going to have it. And I think that goes back to what we said earlier, that I think it chooses who it interacts with. Whatever the interaction is, I think it's strictly, and that's what I tell people all the time. If you want to encounter a Bigfoot, don't go looking for it. If you think you have a Bigfoot in your area, don't set trail cams up in an area that you are not at all the time. I tell people all the time, if you think if you walk down a path or something and you constantly have the same thing happen to you in that area, set a trail cam there, but have it facing, if possible, where you came from, not where you're going to. And you'll have much better luck getting something that way versus, oh, wow, I'm going to go out and put a bunch of trail cams in the woods that I don't frequent, that my scent's not there all the time anyway. Because that's how I think they avoid, wait a minute, there's a new scent in the area, I'm going to stay low. But if it's something that if they're used to you and you set something up or even set them up on your property facing out, but sit out, have a bonfire if you normally do, cook out on an open fire if you want to have an encounter, make noise, just be you.
Don't act.
You'll have a better chance.
You know what? This sounds like good dating advice. Don't act like you're interested, right? And then they'll come to you.
Yeah.
Remember that, Jason? Don't act like they're interested, and then they'll come to you. Jason's like, I'm not answering that.
So can I ask you guys a quick question before we go?
Yeah.
I know
sure.
you ask it all the time, okay? And I know Wes asks it all the time on his show. I'd like to hear from both of you what you think a Bigfoot is. Or Sasquatch, or,
Jason, I'll let you go first.
All right. Well, I actually think that it's a physical being, but yet I think it's still interdimensional. Hence, we were talking earlier about how you have Sasquatch, and then maybe somewhere in that immediate area, somebody else might be seeing glowing orbs. I just think there's a correlation there, and one day I hope we can find out what it is.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So my personal opinion is I think these creatures are a combination of either First Nations or Native Americans somewhere down the line breeding with the earliest humans. And so I think when we see the spiritual part, that's the First Nation, Native American aspect of these creatures that they possess, the spiritual one with nature. And I just think they're a creature that is the best physically and spiritually of a couple different compatible species that happen to breed, and they have just continued on.
So that's kind of like the guardians of the wood.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I mean, I think that to me, my crazy out there theory is that back when the United States, as a country, we started shoving the Native Americans off their land, that these creatures or these tribes were they were somebody that, with our capabilities back then, we could not defeat them. They were physically superior. You could never find them. They could, sneak up on you, kill you, whatever. That our government just said, okay, we're not going to defeat these guys. We're not going to push them. So we're going to create the national park system and give them a place to live in peace. And we'll stay out of their hair. We'll stay out of they'll stay out of our hair. We'll stay out of their hair, so to speak, until, the government decided, well, we're going to try to make as much money as we can off of the national parks and natural resources. And that's where I think that these creatures were like, you know what? We're just going wherever we want. We want to go to Akron, Ohio. We're going to Akron, Ohio.
Part of the rubber capital of the world, man.
Yeah. And I think that is a reasonable explanation. Call me crazy, but I think that if we're going to believe that the government knows about them now, I think it's something that they've known about for hundreds of years. And I just feel like the way these creatures have interacted with Native Americans and First Nations up in Canada and stuff, that they're either a tribe and unto themselves, or a mystical creature that kind of has a foot in both worlds, and maybe not literally a supernatural creature, but like I said, if we have people here that we talk to, if you're a psychic medium, to me, you're kind of supernatural.
Yeah.
You may not be able to fly or see through steel, but if you can communicate with a dimension of beings or that we can't see, or the regular person, that makes you kind of supernatural. So
yeah.
I'm not saying that these things are crawling into the next dimension or flying spaceships, but I think that they probably have some supernatural abilities or qualities to them spiritually, or being, they're being one with nature and stuff. So, but that's totally just my best guess. So,
well, hopefully we're all still around when those, one of ours gets to find out what it is. You know what I mean?
Yes, it would be. Hey, look, I mean, the experiences you shared with us on this episode, there's going to be a lot of jealous people out there. There's going to be a lot of people that say, how many pairs of underwear did you go through? But there's also going to be a lot of people saying, man, I'd love to be touched, or I'd love to, see a dog get smacked, or just any of that stuff would be just insane. So, but, I mean, I know Jason and I appreciate you sharing these experiences, because like
Absolutely.
we've said a million times, if you don't come on and share what happened to you, then, you heard the guy, Johnny Two Bears, say what happened to him, and it verified some stuff for you. What if there's somebody else out there that saw their brother almost get touched, and all this time they've been like, that was just made up. I didn't really see that. And now they've heard somebody, you relate that story. I mean, that's what it takes for people to come forward and say, man, I wasn't crazy. So we definitely appreciate that. So,
well, I appreciate you letting me come on and tell them, man. It's therapeutic. I know I've told them to a few people, and a couple of investigators I told, and then they wrote a book on it and changed mine and my dad's name, and just kind of left a sour taste. And we're both like, yeah, we're not talking to anybody who, is doing any type of research again. And that's when Jody Cook reached out and said, look, here's what these guys are doing. I just feel that you need a heads up on it. He kind of let us know,
yeah,
what these guys were doing. And then there was an article in the Akron Beacon Journal about it. And that's when I'm like, oh, man, I got to go with the book. I want to make sure they didn't put our names in there, But
yeah,
thank God they didn't. We were already lining up attorneys to sue the crap out of them.
Well, geez. No, I'm glad that I'm glad you reached out to us, and thank you for coming on. And I think this is a great Christmas gift to all of our listeners. I think this is a great episode for once everybody gets their presents opened and is done with all the family stuff, or better yet, gather the family around and listen to the show. And let's see.
Light a fire in the fireplace, pop popcorn.
That's got to be somebody else's tagline. I'm not using that. But so Bob, I hope you and your fiance out there are safe these last couple days while you're driving. Hopefully you guys get to be home for Christmas. But thank you for coming on and sharing with us. We appreciate it.
Not a problem. I appreciate you guys having me on. You guys have a Merry Christmas too.
Yes, and you too. And be safe out there.
Thank you.
Will do, sir.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.